What is up, YouTube fans? So, a little departure from the stuff I've been normally posting with the music and all that. I want to do something a little bit more fun, kind of get an insight onto some of the things I do in the pastime and with the family, so on and so forth. Now, if you watched the previous video, you found out that I am huge into cars and car culture. Cars, motorcycles, so on and so forth. And I was very blessed that on my 18th birthday, yeah, that was a while ago, my father handed down his 1973 Plymouth Barracuda. And the intent was to have the vehicle restored, repainted, back on the road, so on and so forth. And he had, on the side, he had some parts that he was going to put in there. We had a block in ready to go, and so on and so forth. And to make a long story short, and we're going to do another video on another day for this, a guy comes in, says he'd help us out with the project, ends up running away with most of our stuff. And I make some choices in my 20s that I'm not able to work on the vehicle and put money into it, and it just sits, right? And so finally, I would say about 15 years later, in 2013, my father says, hey, I really want to build the motor for that vehicle before I get too old and what have you. I want to hear it run. I want to have you set up so that you can drop it in the vehicle when you're ready to put it in there. And I'm like, okay, how much is it going to cost? He's like, no, I'm going to cover it for you. So it was gifted again to have this motor from my father. And that's what this video is about, is the process that has happened since 2013 to today in 2020. And this video is going to culminate with the very first fuel firing of the engine. All right, so first thing, a little bit about the block itself. The block is the original block from the Barracuda. It is a 318. Of course, they had in 1973 they made two motors with the V8. You had the 340 and the 318. The 318 was for the more base models. And on this motor, we ended up having it bored out 30 over. So it's a 318 bored 30 over. So each cylinder is about 3.94 inches, all right, so almost 4 inches of total size on the bore. The heads on the vehicle, the heads are from a MOPAR, or from another MOPAR Chrysler vehicle. They're 360 heads, so they went on the 360 motor. So the 360s were made 1972 beforehand. Everything has been gasket matched. They massaged the valves. I think the valve size is like 186 and 202, so yeah, a little bit bigger than the factory 318s. The rotating assembly, he chose not to use the crank that he had set for. He ended up going with a different crank, and we ended up getting a complete, essentially it's a custom assembly. It's 100% balanced, all right? It is a SCAT 9000 series crank with a 4-inch total stroke on it. We're going to do the math in just a second. The pistons come from Diamond. They are the 50,000 ones, the 500 ones, and they are flat top pistons. And the rods are from SCAT, also as well as the crank. They are Pro Comp I-beam rods. The cam inside of this thing is a crane cam. Now this cam was actually the one that he originally ordered in the early 90s, late 80s. It is the crane 694561, so that's the model number, 694561. Basically, it's the largest cam you can get and still maintain the hydraulic lifters. We didn't want to go with the rolling lifters because, general maintenance and so on and so forth. We wanted to keep it reliable. So this cam has a 528 lift, basically at 504 in with a 302 duration and 528 out with a 312 duration. The sweet spot for this motor is going to be in the 3,000 to 65,000 RPM range. It's a little bit up there. The intake is an Edelbrock Performer, nothing fancy there, it's from Edelbrock, and the carburetor is an 830 Quick Fuel brand double pumper with a mechanical secondary. Why mechanical secondary, not vacuum secondary? Well, my dad's an old race car guy, and he loves that feel that when you start getting into that secondary, you know about it, as opposed to doing something with vacuum where it just does it automatically, which is really nice. So if I'm cruising, I can keep it nice in the two barrels, and then when I get on a little bit, I know when I'm getting into that secondary and really start dumping that fuel in. All right, so doing the math on this, you look at the bore size, you look at the stroke, so a 4-inch stroke with a 394 bore. That turns this Chrysler MOPAR 318 into a 390 or 390.15. We'll just round down and make it a 390. And so yeah, that's the basics of this particular motor. Now, a few months ago, my father came up to me and says, I'm going to buy an engine stand, and I want to hook the engine up onto the engine stand so we could test fire it and run it. That way, if we put it in the car one day and you're ready to do it and you find out something's bad, well, while it's out of the vehicle, it's much easier to work on than putting it in the vehicle and then pulling it out to fix something. And sure enough, a few weeks ago, we had our first fire. And when I say first fire, we fired it just on brake clear. Nothing else was connected other than the distribution and so on and so forth. Fuel wasn't hooked up. But you can kind of see there in the pictures of how it was all wired up. And we did have an initial fire. In fact, here's that video for that initial firing. Now, this past weekend, we attempted to start it with fuel, but something changed and something happened. And our initial intent was to run it on fuel on that following Saturday. Well, something happened in the ignition electrical system and it wasn't quite working perfectly. Why? Well, we suspect that it's better to have the ignition circuit on a MOPAR, using a MOPAR ignition on a separate circuit as opposed to the same circuit as everything else. Why? I don't know. It's just a weird thing like that, right? So we had to do a slight modification with the GM style ignition system, and then Monday night we had our first firing on fuel. Now, some knucklehead forgot to turn the audio on, and I pulled a complete ID 10T error with my audio equipment. And wasn't able to get the sound, but you can kind of see there where the puffs of smoke come out of the back. It's running really rich. And then we stopped it to fix a quick leak. In fact, you'll see in the next video that that leak is still there and we got to do some other mods to it. But here is the next firing that we have. I'm going to give you the whole clip, all right? The whole firing, no sound. No sound other than the sound the engine made and the conversation points we were having. So go ahead and turn your audio system up and check it out.
Which way do I need to go?
You need to go
Counterclockwise?
Yeah. Okay. Not too much.
I know.
So there you have it, our fuel firing on our MOPAR 318 stroker motor. Now the next few steps is to get it tuned up. As you saw there, it was running really rough. We got to get tuned up. We got to get the fuel figured out, right? It's dumping a lot of fuel. It's running really rich. And we got a couple other things to figure out, like that water leak you saw with the, if you looked at the where the thermostat is, you saw that housing still leaking, what have you. Yeah, it turns out those things were stripped out and wasn't holding in properly, so we got to go ahead and drill that and tap it and all that kind of good stuff. But I'm hoping that the next video I can get to you will be the vehicle and the engine during the break-in process, running smoothly, and then I'm going to bring you a video on what's happening with the Barracuda and the steps that I decided to make with that car. Thank you so much for tuning in.